My mom said I was the dumb one, and she was going to make sure I stayed that way. The harsh blue light of my phone screen pierced the absolute darkness of the campus library basement. The digital clock in the corner of the heavy research monitor read 11:51 at night. The text message was from her, sitting there like a venomous snake on the screen. Short, vicious, and entirely devoid of anything resembling maternal love. I have canceled your tuition. Come home immediately. You are embarrassing this family by pretending you have a brain. My throat tightened so fast I choked on a shallow breath. My fingers gripped the sharp edge of the heavy wooden research desk until my knuckles turned stark white and the wood pressed painfully deep into my skin. A younger version of me, the terrified girl trapped in that sprawling Charlotte estate, would have collapsed right there into a hyperventilating panic attack. I would have called her immediately, sobbing hysterically, begging for forgiveness for a crime I did not commit. But tonight, I just stared at the glowing letters. I swallowed the thick, heavy lump of fear residing in my throat, letting the cold reality wash over me. I swiped the notification away. My gaze shifted back to the monitor, humming quietly in front of me. My hands hit the keyboard, bypassing the standard student portal and logging straight into the restricted legal database that my campus job granted me access to. I typed in my mother's maiden name and the addresses of the commercial properties she managed. I pulled the very first batch of hidden financial records my mother had spent an entire decade burying under complex layers of corporate secrecy. The screen quickly populated with names, dates, offshore routing numbers, and stolen accounts. A slow, icy calm settled deep into my chest. The war had officially started, and she had no idea what kind of soldier she had created. I was born into a massive gilded cage in the wealthiest zip code of Charlotte, North Carolina. To the outside world, my mother, Catherine, was a pristine, untouchable, high society matriarch. She was the woman who, through lavish, perfectly catered charity galas, wearing immaculate navy suits and a bright smile that never quite reached her calculating. Cold eyes. But behind the towering wrought iron gates and manicured hedges of our estate, she was a terrifying architect of psychological warfare. She did not raise children. She curated financial assets. From the exact moment we were old enough to comprehend spoken words, Catherine assigned each of us a rigid, inescapable label. She treated us like characters in a play she was directing, and deviation from the script was punished relentlessly. My oldest sister, Morgan, was branded the genius. The suffocating pressure to maintain absolute academic perfection shattered her nervous system. She memorized heavy textbooks until her eyes literally bled. If she scored a 98 on a final exam, Catherine would lock her in her bedroom for the entire weekend without internet or book, telling her that failure was a contagious disease that needed to be quarantined. Morgan lived completely trapped in her room with debilitating anxiety, terrified of making a single mistake. Erica was designated the trophy. Catherine placed her on severe, supervised starvation diets when she was only 12 years old. She measured Erica's waist with a yellow tape measure every single morning to ensure she remained perfectly pageant ready. Catherine would buy her dresses 2 sizes too small and force her to fast for 5 days straight to fit into them. Erica fainted on stage 3 separate times by the time she was 15. And Catherine just publicly blamed it on dehydration. If Erica gained a single pound, her dinner was thrown directly into the trash can. My brother, Spencer, was the enforcer. Catherine forced him into brutal physical labor and intense weightlifting regimens from early childhood. He would cry out in the middle of the night from the severe inflammation in his joints. Instead of taking him to a real doctor, Catherine would stand in his doorway and tell him that real men do not cry over growing pains. She forced him to carry 50-pound bags of landscaping rocks across the sprawling estate just to prove he was not weak. She pushed him until his knees literally ground themselves to dust, molding him into the physically broken, obedient muscle she needed to keep the rest of us in line. He was terrified of her, and he took that blinding terror out on us. And me, I was Vanessa. The burden, the dumb one. I was meant to stay utterly helpless forever. She forced me to write that I was stupid and a burden 500 times in a spiral notebook every time I asked Dina's question deemed inappropriate. She intentionally unenrolled me from advanced reading classes, telling the school counselors I suffered from severe learning disabilities that I did not actually have. If I brought home a book above my grade level, it was confiscated immediately. If I tried to speak at the heavy mahogany dinner table about something I learned, she would loudly mock my grammar until I cried. They broke my spirit daily back then. But today, my fingers are the ones pulling the strings, sitting in the quiet campus library, staring at the corporate shell companies glowing brightly on the screen. The true architecture of Catherine's abuse became crystal clear. This was never just about cruel parenting. It was a calculated, brilliant business strategy. Our late grandfather had left behind a $4,500,000 trust fund, legally mandated to be divided equally among the four of us upon turning 21. Catherine could not access the massive principal unless she could legally prove to a probate judge that her children were dependent, entirely incompetent, or a severe danger to themselves. By manufacturing Morgan's crippling anxiety, starving Erica into physical fragility, destroying Spencer's mobility, and legally documenting me as intellectually stunted, she maintained absolute iron-fisted control over millions of dollars. She needed a severely disabled burden to justify her permanent legal guardianship. When I secretly passed my high school equivalency exams, secured independent financial aid, and escaped to a state university 3 hours away, I threatened the foundation of her entire financial empire. I was the loose thread that could unravel her hoarded wealth. Now, my phone buzzed again. Vibrating violently against the desk, another text from Catherine. I am coming to get you right now. I read the terrifying words, felt a momentary spike of adrenaline in my veins, and calmly forwarded the message to a secure folder. Catherine escalated her campaign by sunrise, moving with the ruthless efficiency of a corporate raider. She began calling the university administration, the financial aid office, and the campus health center. She spread panicked, tearful rumors that her deeply troubled daughter was experiencing a severe psychotic break. She claimed I was a massive danger to myself and the entire student body. She needed concrete medical proof to legally drag me back to the estate. And she found it. I knew exactly what she had done. She had hired a notoriously corrupt private concierge psychiatrist in Charlotte to forge official medical documents claiming I was completely detached from reality. I needed the digital receipts to prove her massive fraud. But I could not just guess a complicated password or hire a magical hacker. I had to use her own extreme hubris against her. Catherine was unbelievably arrogant, assuming no one would ever dare investigate her action. She used our estate's 6-digit driveway gate code for absolutely everything she owned. I navigated to the login page for our family's shared cloud account, but a massive digital barrier stood in my way. Apple's two-factor authentication. Logging in from an unrecognized campus library computer would instantly ping her pristine phone with a blaring security alert, blowing my cover before I even saw the files. The estate's emergency tablet was kept in a locked drawer in the kitchen. But Morgan knew how to pick the cheap lock with a hairpin. The real danger was the loud sound of the heavy drawer sliding open. The kitchen was located directly beneath Catherine's massive study. I sat in the library, my eyes glued to the digital clock on the bottom corner of the monitor. 11:55, 11:56. Every passing second felt like a physical weight pressing down heavily on my chest. I imagined Catherine sitting in her plush leather chair upstairs, her phone sitting right next to her on the polished wood desk. If the screen lit up with a security alert, she would instantly change the password and freeze the entire system. My single window of opportunity would slam shut forever. My fingers tapped a frantic, silent rhythm on the edge of the keyboard. Then my screen lit up with Morgan's text. I have the tablet. Send the code. I clicked the login button. The prompt asked for verification. I held my breath. 5 agonizing seconds later, Morgan texted the 6 digits. I typed them in with shaking fingers and hit enter. The screen loaded. 1 click. And the horrific truth flashed brightly in front of my eyes. I navigated to her recent documents and downloaded the concierge doctor's fabricated psychiatric evaluations. I scrolled further down into her messaging history, my stomach turning to solid ice as I found Catherine's direct text logs with the estate chef. She had actively instructed him to slip heavy prescription sedatives into my food during my holiday visits to simulate severe cognitive impairment. She was literally poisoning her own daughter to secure a medical diagnosis for a judge. The evidence was damning, horrifying, and perfectly preserved in the cloud. I exported every single file, every text, and every PDF document to an encrypted external drive, pulling it from the computer just as Erica sent an urgent, terrified warning text. Erica's message made the blood in my veins run completely cold. Catherine had successfully secured a fraudulent involuntary commitment order from a sympathetic local magistrate. She was coming to the campus dorm tonight with a private medical transport team to forcefully drag me to a private lockdown facility. She was going to physically steal my autonomy, lock me in a padded room, heavily medicated against my will, and legally seize my portion of the trust forever. The concrete walls of the library basement felt like they were rapidly closing in on me. Her terrifying urgency was entirely motivated by a ticking clock she could not stop. I was turning 21 in exactly 48 hours. According to the strict stipulations of her grandfather's trust, the moment the clock struck midnight on my birthday, I gained independent, untouchable control of my massive share. Unless Catherine locked me away as medically incompetent tonight. She was incredibly desperate, and desperate people make incredibly sloppy mistakes. I shoved the encrypted drive deep into my heavy backpack. I knew filling out standard police reports at the front desk of the station would take hours I simply did not have. I bypassed the slow bureaucratic process entirely. I walked straight across the bustling campus, pushing past crowds of naive students enjoying the crisp autumn air, and shoved open the heavy oak doors of the university's legal counsel office. The chief of campus police happened to be sitting by the window, holding a warm cup of coffee. I did not waste time crying. I did not explain my childhood trauma or beg for sympathy. I dropped the thick stack of printed financial records, the forged psychiatric evaluations, and the horrifying poisoning logs directly onto the polished mahogany desk. I laid out Catherine's exact plan to commit a highly illegal medical kidnapping on university property. The counsel's face went entirely pale as he read the texts about the sedatives, followed quickly by the chief of police, who immediately reached for his radio. We set the trap together. By 8 o'clock that evening, I was sitting completely alone in my small dorm room. I turned off the main overhead lights, leaving only a small desk lamp casting long, dark shadows across the cold floor. I left the deadbolt unlocked. I sat on the edge of my narrow, uncomfortable mattress, staring intently at the brass door handle, listening to the heavy, oppressive silence of the hallway. I could hear their heavy footsteps echoing down the long dormitory hallway long before they reached my door. The distinct, sharp click of Catherine's designer heels, the heavy, dragging shuffle of Spencer's destroyed knees, the nervous, squeaking rubber soles of the corrupt doctor. They stopped right outside my room. The brass doorknob slowly turned. When the door flew open, the sudden rush of air from the hallway sent a violent chill straight down my spine. The trap was set perfectly, and the predator was finally in the cage. Catherine stepped inside, looking flawlessly put together in a tailored navy suit. Her hair was perfectly swept back. She looked like she was arriving for an exclusive corporate board meeting, not a brutal kidnapping. She held a heavy black medical bag tightly in her right hand. Behind her stood the corrupt concierge doctor, nervously clutching a clipboard, and my brother, Spencer. Spencer looked physically broken. His broad shoulders slumped forward, forced to act as the terrifying muscle to drag his own little sister away. Catherine offered a chilling, perfectly rehearsed maternal smile. "It is time to go home." "Vanessa," she whispered, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We are just fixing the family ecosystem. You are very sick, and your brain needs to rest." She raised her hand and motioned for Spencer to grab both of my arms and pin me down to the mattress. The trap sprang with brutal precision. The bathroom door swung violently open, and the university legal counsel stepped out, closely followed by the chief of campus police and two heavily armed, uniformed officers. They did not yell. They did not draw their weapons. They just stood there, a terrifying wall of absolute, undeniable legal authority. This smug, untouchable arrogance drained from Catherine's face in an instant, replaced by raw, unadulterated panic. The blood completely left her cheek, leaving her looking as pale as a ghost. Her perfectly manicured hands began to tremble violently. The heavy medical bag slipped from her grip and hit the cheap linoleum floor with a heavy thud, spilling sharp syringes and heavy glass vials of sedatives near my feet. I stood up slowly and pulled my phone from my pocket. I pulled up the trust documents I had uncovered and turned directly to my brother, Spencer. I said, keeping my voice dead level, "She is draining your medical fund to pay for this private facility. She is stealing your surgery money. Look at the screen." Spencer stared at the glowing documents, his eyes rapidly scanning the stolen funds that were supposed to fix his destroyed knees. The realization of her ultimate betrayal hit him like a physical blow to the chest. Catherine screamed at him, her voice cracking with wild hysteria, ordering him to grab me. Instead, Spencer squared his broad shoulders, stepped squarely in front of me to shield my body from her, and and violently shoved the corrupt doctor against the cinder block wall, the officers swarmed the small room immediately. Cold metal handcuffs clicked sharply around Catherine's wrists, pinning her arms behind her tailored suit. The officers detained the whimpering doctor right beside her, pulling his arms back roughly. They dragged my mother out of the room, down the long, brightly lit hallway of the dormitory. Dozens of college students stood in their open doorways, staring in absolute shock. Cell phones raised high, recording every single second. Catherine's pristine, carefully curated high society facade shattered into a million unrecoverable pieces on the cold concrete of a state university. The legal fallout was entirely devastating for her empire. Early the next morning, the outraged university council took my case pro bono. They marched straight into a federal courthouse with the police reports and the forged medical receipts, filing an emergency ex parte injunction to freeze all family assets. The corrupt doctor folded immediately under the immense pressure, terrified of losing his medical license and facing decades in federal prison for conspiracy. He signed a comprehensive plea deal before noon. He turned state's evidence, happily handing the district attorney every single direct email where Catherine instructed him to forge the commitment papers and prescribe the heavy sedatives. 2 days later, an enraged and deeply arrogant Catherine posted bail, believing she was still completely invincible and smarter than the law. She attempted to execute the absolute nuclear option. She drove straight to Charlotte Douglas International Airport, intending to use her emergency power of attorney to wire the $4,500,000 trust to a hidden offshore account and flee on the first flight to a non-extradition country. She thought she could leave us utterly penniless. At the premium airline counter, she aggressively handed over her heavy black card to purchase the ticket. Declined. She scowled, digging into her designer purse, and tried another platinum card. Declined. She screamed at the attendant, demanding to speak to a manager, completely unaware of the trap closing around her. Her accounts were not experiencing a technical glitch. They were federally frozen. The felony fraud investigation and the active arrest warrant had automatically triggered a severe moral turpitude clause buried incredibly deep in my grandfather's original trust documents. By actively attempting to defraud her beneficiaries and commit a felony against a trust member, Catherine legally stripped herself of her fiduciary status. She was entirely disinherited, stripped of her hoarded wealth, and trapped in the terminal. Airport security approached her quickly at the gate, flanked by 2 federal marshals, just as they asked her to turn around and place her hands behind her back. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. I sent her one final text message: "Enjoy your new ecosystem." The aftermath was incredibly swift. My brother Spencer immediately scheduled his total knee replacement surgery using his newly liberated funds, finally seeing a bright future where he could walk without blinding pain. Erica and Morgan packed their bags the exact same afternoon, relocating together to a beautiful, specialized trauma and eating disorder recovery clinic funded directly by the Unlocked Trust. The towering wrought iron gates of the estate locked behind them for the very last time. The golden cage was finally permanently empty. The criminal justice system is incredibly flawed, but there is a distinct poetic beauty in watching a raging narcissist try to manipulate a federal judge. The heavy wooden gavel finally fell 6 agonizing months later in a packed Charlotte courtroom. Catherine stood at the defense table, wearing a drab, ill-fitting gray suit that she clearly despised, and tried to deploy the exact same charming high society smile she used to control our estate. She spoke in her calm, reasonable, maternal voice, explaining to the court that we were simply deeply troubled children prone to making up elaborate fantasies. But the judge did not care about her tone. The judge only cared about the towering stack of digital receipts sitting on the prosecutor's desk. He looked at the poisoning logs. He looked at the forged psychiatric evaluations. And then he looked right through her. He stared down from the bench with absolute disgust and sentenced Catherine to 7 years in state prison for felony fraud, reckless endangerment, and attempted medical kidnapping, with eligibility for parole only after serving 5 full years behind bars. The court also ordered restitution of over $250,000 to cover our mounting legal fees and the specific portions of the trust she had managed to siphon away. The damage to her carefully manicured social standing was absolute and irreversible. The prestigious country club revoked her membership before the criminal trial even concluded. Her wealthy, elite friends stopped answering her frantic calls, scrubbing their social media profiles of any photographic association with her. She lost her freedom, her luxury, and her power. But more importantly, she lost her audience. The curtain had permanently closed on her twisted play. 3 months into her sentence, a white envelope arrived at my new apartment. The handwriting was unmistakable. Perfect. Sweeping cursive loops on cheap prison paper. I opened it while standing alone in my sunlit kitchen. She wrote 3 long pages about how much she had sacrificed for us, how she only ever wanted to protect her children from a harsh world, and how she gracefully forgave me for tearing the family apart. I am still your mother. The final line read, underlined twice for emphasis, a year ago, those exact words would have sent me spiraling into a dark pit of guilt and panic. I would have drafted a dozen different replies, crying over the paper, trying desperately to make her understand my pain and see the truth. But no. I stood in my kitchen and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sorrow, no guilt. I folded the paper in half, dropped it directly into the trash can under the sink, and went back to making my morning coffee. There is a profound, liberating power in recognizing that some people are fundamentally committed to misunderstanding you. You do not have to participate in their delusions ever again. There is a very specific type of grief that comes with cutting off your family. It is a mourning process for the parents you deserved but never actually had. You grieve the empty chairs at your graduation. You grieve the heavy silence on your birthday. But eventually, that sharp grief transforms into an incredibly fierce, protective love for the life you build with your own 2 hands. My life now is quiet, and peace is the greatest, most expensive luxury I own. I spend my weekends sitting at a local coffee shop with friends who know absolutely nothing about the dark golden cage in Charlotte. They just know Vanessa, the cheerful library assistant who studies abnormal psychology and laughs way too loud at bad jokes. We celebrate holidays together in cramped apartments with mismatched plates and burned food, building a chosen family based on mutual respect rather than toxic transactional obligation. The friends who sit with me do not love me because of my assigned label or my potential earning power. They love me because I am Vanessa. Erica is eating regular meals again, her face glowing with a health she was never allowed to experience growing up. Morgan is applying to graduate schools, channeling her brilliant mind into a future she actually wants, free from the terror of perfection. Spencer is walking without a heavy cane for the very first time in 10 years, his deep scars healing alongside his mind. We survive the ecosystem. and we burned it to the ground on our way out. If you are listening to this and you recognize the dark, suffocating shadow of my mother in your own home, I need you to stop what you are doing and hear me clearly. Toxic family systems do not assign labels based on reality or absolute truth. They assign them based entirely on what they need to extract from you to survive. Catherine needed a broken burden to justify her financial control, so she tried to violently manufacture one. She called me dumb because my intelligence was the single greatest threat to her empire. Surviving a narcissist requires rewriting the entire rule book they forced you to memorize in the dark. Let me give you the 3 definitive rules that actually kept me alive. Rule number 1, silence is not a survival strategy. It is a direct subsidy for their abuse. When you swallow your righteous anger, when you hide their cruelty behind closed doors just to keep the fragile peace, you are only funding their massive ego. You are actively protecting the very system that is crushing the life out of you. The moment you expose their actions to the blinding light of the real world, their power evaporates. Catherine thrived in the quiet, isolated shadows of our massive estate, but she broke completely under the fluorescent lights of a university hallway when people finally saw her true face. Rule number 2, the label they give you is their limitation. It is not yours. They will constantly call you the dramatic one, the selfish one, the unstable one, or the dumb one. They do this intentionally because if they can convince you that you are fundamentally broken, they can convince you that you desperately need them to fix you. Do not ever accept their diagnosis. The moment you stop performing the miserable role they assign to you, their entire stage collapses into dust. You do not have to prove to them that you are smart, capable, or worthy. You just have to drop the script and walk off the stage. Rule number 3, true power does not ever need to scream. Catherine relied heavily on terror, extreme volume, and physical force to maintain her control. She needed us to fear her, to respect her. Real power is quiet. Real power is methodically gathering your evidence, setting your ironclad boundaries, and letting the brutal consequences of their own terrible actions destroy them. You do not need to match their explosive rage. You just need to quietly outsmart their strategy. Bureaucracy, paperwork, and the undeniable truth hit much harder than violence ever could. We are taught from a very young age that blood is an unbreakable, sacred bond, that family is the ultimate, unquestionable sanctuary. But blood does not make you family. Consistent, safe, and respectful behavior makes you family. You are absolutely allowed to walk away from people who actively hurt you, even if you share a last name, a long history, or a roof over your head. Trust is something that is earned daily through actions, not something owed through genetics. You do not owe your bright future to the people who actively tried to dismantle it in the dark. Look closely at the role your family assigned to you. Look at the heavy expectations they place squarely on your shoulders. Now ask yourself the single most important question: who profits from you staying in that miserable role? Who benefits from your silence, your compliance, and your deep pain? If the answer is anyone but you, it is time to pack your bags and change the script forever. Drop your story in the comments below. Tell me the heavy label you are shedding today. Let's break the silence together, because you were never the problem, and you are finally free. I know exactly what you were screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there thinking, why didn't she run sooner? Why on earth did she stay in that giant house, letting her mother drug her, starve her sister? and destroy her brother's knees for years. Why didn't they all just walk out the front door? Let us talk about that. Because what you just watched is not just a dramatic story. It is a terrifying masterclass in psychological warfare and high-stakes financial self-defense. To understand why victims stay in these gilded cages, we have to look at something psychologists call the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. When you grow up in a toxic ecosystem like Catherine built, you are not stupid for staying. You are deeply chemically conditioned. Abusive parents operate exactly like broken slot machines in a rigged casino. 99% of the time, they give you absolutely nothing but pain, harsh criticism, and severe punishment. But that 1% of the time, they give you a fake smile, a tiny compliment, or just a brief moment of quiet peace. As a child, you become fiercely addicted to those tiny crumbs of hope. You keep pulling the lever year after year, thinking that maybe this time you will finally hit the jackpot and get a real loving mother. Vanessa and her siblings were not weak. They were trapped in a survival loop engineered by a master manipulator. But the moment Vanessa finally woke up and broke the loop, she did not just get angry. She got incredibly smart. Let us break down her specific survival moves, because this is the exact blueprint you need if you ever face a financial or emotional predator. First, she used the audit strategy. Financial abusers rely entirely on your manufactured ignorance. Catherine spent 2 decades drilling it into Vanessa's head that she was the dumb one. Why? Because a child who believes she cannot understand math will never ask to look at the trust fund paperwork. Vanessa did not confront her mother with tears and accusations. She quietly logged into a legal database and an iCloud account. Scammers and abusers absolutely hate a paper trail. The moment you start looking at the actual receipts, their entire empire of lies collapses instantly. Second, she executed the red tape skip. When Vanessa learned about the fake medical commitment, she did not waste time arguing with her mother. And she did not wait in line to fill out slow paperwork at a police precinct. She walked straight into the offices of the university legal counsel and the chief of police. When you are dealing with a highly organized predator, you do not fight them in the mud. You escalate immediately to the highest authority in the room and drop a legal anvil on their head. Finally, she deployed the bureaucratic guillotine. This is the smartest move in the entire story. Vanessa did not have to physically steal her $4,500,000 trust fund back. She used the system's own rules to disarm the threat. By baiting her mother into a highly public felony arrest, she automatically triggered the moral turpitude clause in the trust. She weaponized Catherine's own staggering arrogance to legally disinherit her. She essentially orchestrated the ultimate buyout, investing pure legal strategy to purchase her absolute freedom. Here is the brutal verdict. Toxic people will always try to assign you a role that benefits their wallet or their ego, and they will fight dirty to keep you trapped in it. But the second you realize you are the one holding the pen, you can write them entirely out of your story. Your peace, your autonomy, and your financial independence are worth infinitely more than any toxic family loyalty. Have you ever had to audit a toxic relationship or walk away from someone who tried to trap you in a fake role? I want to hear exactly how you broke free. Drop your story in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button for more deep dives. And remember, stay smart, stay safe, and never let anyone else hold the keys to your life.